Hey, what's up, guys? John here. Gavin Newsom has a plan to make housing more affordable. And I have a lot of history, a lot of experience in California in real estate here. And I'll tell you what, it's very expensive and it's very challenging to invest and be a landlord in California. California has something called rent control. And so what California rent control is it is a set of guidelines that landlords have to operate inside of, which will essentially tell you what you can and can't do with your property, how much you can and can't raise the rent. It tells you basically everything. So you no longer become the actual owner of the property, you're more of a property management firm for the city in which holds that rent control law. And every year it will give you a set price in which you're allowed to raise rent. So it could be 3% or 5%. Each year is different, right? So what's interesting is every year it gets harder and harder for landlords. And so Gavin Newsom says we have a really big issue. And this issue is that we don't have enough affordable housing. So what happens now is we look at the law here. It's you have more than half of Angelina's rent and 7 in 10 rental units are covered by rent control. 7 in 10 out of the entire, for this example, that's Los Angeles. So 7 in 10 apartments. You have tenants that say, hey, you're only allowed to increase your rent 3 or 5% per year, and last year rent increased 10%. So what happens is over the course of 5, 10, 15 years, that divide between the normal market rent and what the current tenant's paying becomes great. And so they're incentivized to stay inside of the unit, which is good for the tenant because the tenant has a more affordable and practical place to live. But it's very bad for everyone else trying to enter that market. It's also very bad for the city because the lower the rents are, the lower the resale for the building is, and the property taxes are based on the property's value. So if the rents are, let's say, half of market value, then the city's getting half of that tax revenue every single year for school funding and police departments and street services and government agencies. So the city actually gets less. In addition to that, the city charges a ton of money for you to do anything there. I built a duplex there about 9 months ago, and I spent $25,000 just in permit costs. $25K just in permit costs there. John Cox, who's running for governor right now in California, lives, I believe, in San Diego, and he does all of his real estate developments outside of California in the Midwest for these very reasons. So what is very fascinating to me is Gavin Newsom is restructuring the entire problem as the real problem is that we don't have affordable units. No. The real problem is that people in California are in a rock and a hard place because the developers can't afford to build units at a loss. When it's so expensive to actually build units, they can't do it. So they have to do what makes sense, which is to build them and receive a profit on that build. And the tenants don't want to move, so you're always going to have this crisis in housing. So what California really needs to do is reconsider a new strategy. But what he's doing right now, I think, is going to bring some real pain. So the first thing he's doing is he's setting forward a plan for new buildings to become more green, which will raise the cost of construction. So the cost is going to go up, meaning the rents are likely going to follow that. A recent building code change for new construction could reduce emissions by requiring the use of solar panels and batteries, raising prices in an already expensive state. California has led the nation in fighting climate change by encouraging the use of renewable energy and electric cars. Now the state is taking on an even harder challenge, reducing emissions from homes, businesses, and other buildings that have to be heated, cooled, and powered. This month, state regulators updated California's building code to require new homes, commercial buildings that have solar panels and batteries, and the wiring needed to switch from heating that burn natural gas to heat pumps that run on electricity. Energy experts say it is one of the most sweeping single environmental updates to building codes ever attempted by a government agency. I mean, you think about how big this is. Ultimately, where he wants to go with this is get all buildings off of fossil fuels, which will basically the investor, the landlord, the property owner will have to take the utilities. So the stove, the washer, dryer, the electricity, everything will be on solar and on clean energy, which is going to be very expensive, which would then likely push all the cost onto the renter, making things very hard for a new first-time home buyer to enter that market. But some energy and building experts warn that California may be taking on too much too quickly and focusing on the wrong target, new buildings Exactly what I was saying. Rather than much larger universe of existing structures, their biggest fear is that these new requirements will drive up the state's already high construction costs, putting new homes out of the reach of middle and lower income families that cannot easily afford the higher upfront cost of cleaner energy and heating equipment, which typically pays for itself over through savings of monthly utility bills. Exactly what I was saying. The median single-family home in California sells for $800K compared to $360,000 nationwide, and businesses pay more for rent in cities like San Fran, San Jose, and basically all throughout California. A big reason for that cost is higher. California's state is that the state is not building enough homes, something that lawmakers tried to address last week by advancing legislation that would allow for more homes on each parcel of land. And that is exactly what they're trying to do here with this. They're trying to put all single family residences on duplex zoning. So this is how it will look. A large part of affordable housing shortages is the state because the population is growing, but the number of housing units is not growing at the same time. The House issue, so here it is right here. California lawmakers gave initial approval to a bill that would allow for 2-unit buildings to be built on lots that had previously been limited to single family. So people that are going into, let's say, West LA, Brentwood, West Hollywood, they're going into these R1 residential communities to buy a home that's private. You know, maybe some people don't want to live off of Hollywood Boulevard where there's a million people. So they go to these expensive neighborhoods, they buy a house. Well, now the zoning will likely change there, giving more foot traffic into that community, taking away some of the desirability, and possibly impacting the price point in those communities. Adding solar panels and a battery to a new home can raise its cost by $20,000 or more. While that might not matter to somebody buying a multi-million-dollar property, it could be a burden on a family borrowing a few $100,000 to buy a house. We're going to see the impact in office rents. You're going to see it in the price of milk at your grocery store, because it's going to go all throughout California, so everything is going to be likely going up in California. To me, that's the problem. Like, if I were looking at things from a constructive way of solving the issue is there's not enough units. The issue is affordability. So obviously the solution would be to bring more supply and make it a little bit more affordable. How can you do that? By getting Gavin Newsom and a lot of these leaders in California out of the way so that capitalism can work and function as a whole, rather than this, unfortunately, it's like a takedown of the middle class in California right now. He then goes on to say the idea at the heart of California's new building code, which is expected to go into effect in 2023, is to reduce and eventually eliminate the use of fossil fuels like natural gas, replacing them with electricity generated by renewable sources like solar panels, wind turbines, hydroelectric dams. It is difficult to make that switch because millions of homes and commercial buildings need to be updated. That's why California is starting with the easiest building to change, ones that haven't been built yet. So that's where they're going. So it'll be very fascinating to watch how California handles this upcoming affordability crisis that we're stepping into. I personally believe that California is one of the most beautiful places to live. It really is. Great weather, you could do anything. California 10 years ago, 15 years ago, was an amazing place to be. But every single year it just gets harder and harder for the business owner and the entrepreneur to stay there with high taxes, high regulations, high housing costs. Everything is high. And it's all because of the way that system and that structure has been laid out in California. So when they point the finger and they say, oh, it's the real estate investor, it's the developer. No, everyone wants to do a business where they can make money, of course. But if you take away all the incentive and you basically force people to where they have to pay excruciatingly high cost to build properties, the only way that they're going to build it is if they make money doing it. So they need to really cut that regulation in half and make California a little bit more like Florida in that sense, where people can go out there and build property. And that's what they need. They need housing. California is in a real housing shortage. And I hope that it doesn't continue down this road. But to me, what I think is likely to happen is that California may lean into a place of universal basic income. And it may just continue growing and growing from there to where it's just more and more dependence on the system rather than every individual contributing to capitalism and allowing that market to work organically like it should. Drop your comments below. I'm really curious as to what you guys think about the changes in residential zoning that they're trying to implement, everything that they're doing with clean energy, with residential real estate. Do you think it's going to increase pricing for rentals in that market? What do you think? I'm really curious. Love to have a conversation with you. Drop it below. Smash that like button. Sub here. Consider subscribing to my personal channel as well. I'll leave the links pinned to the top comment below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.